Welcome to the Missouri Valley Conference, Mobilizing Voices for Change. I'm Kelly Burke, and we have our third roundtable today on race and social justice. Joining me is Jamison Whiting, the former Northern Iowa football player, now in his final year of law school at UC Irvine. Jamison, upon graduation this year, will be joining a large law firm back in his hometown of Minneapolis. Shannon Ryan is the longtime Chicago Tribune sports reporter and columnist who specializes in college sports, including covering Loyola and University of Illinois, among many teams. Shannon's also been very active in covering the intersection of race and social issues in sports. She's also a mom to her biracial son, 7-year-old Aiden. And Kareem Richardson, the former Evansville point guard and standout turned Indiana State assistant men's basketball coach. Kareem is in his second stint in Terre Haute. He's also active in Coaches for Change, and he is the father of 3. Welcome to all 3 of you. Thank you so much for being here today. Before we get into the meat of our discussion, I wanted to give you all an opportunity to really give some context to each of your backgrounds and growing up and how it shaped who you are today and what you're doing now. So Jamison, let's start with you.
Thank you, Kelly, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here all with you, Shannon and Kareem. It's definitely, especially around this time, it's good seeing friendly faces, and especially from the Missouri Valley as well, because, I love my time there. But I guess sort of, my path to where I am now, grew up in Minneapolis, inner city Minneapolis. My mother was a teacher there, so she taught, in the school district for, I think, probably over 30 years now. So I was sort of able to go to schools outside of where we lived. So I was able to go to the good schools sort of in Minneapolis, and that's sort of where, my experience and value for education came from. Grew up, going to all the inner city schools, high school, was lucky enough to be able to play with a little leather ball, and was good enough to, earn a scholarship at Northern Iowa. Went there, played for 4 years, and then graduated. Spent about a year sort of working with Keith Ellison when he was a Congress member out in D.C., then sort of for the American Entrepreneurship Board as well. And then now I headed off to law school to figure things out, and almost done. Thank you, Kelly.
Shannon.
It's nice to see all of you. I grew up in probably the opposite of, it sounds like, where Jamison grew up, in rural Ohio, where cows were my next door neighbor. So just a very homogenous setting. And then I went to school at St. Mary's College in South Bend, Indiana, and started working for the newspaper there that's affiliated with Notre Dame. So I covered a lot of Notre Dame's sports too. So that was exciting and made me want to go into the sports writing field. And then I started out in Philadelphia, and where there's a lot of passionate, very sports is their religion, a lot like Chicago. So, and that's a city that really toughens you up, I think, from, a girl from Ohio. And really enjoyed that, and then came to Chicago I think 11, 12 years ago now. And started working for the Tribune, and covering a lot of college sports, but like you said, a lot of other things too, and getting more into column writing as well.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be on. I grew up, mom and dad, before they got divorced, my dad was in the Air Force, so I grew up bouncing around, and I was born in Tacoma, Washington, and stayed there for just a little bit. Then lived in England, lived in California, lived Illinois. I call Rantoul, Illinois, home. That's where I went to high school, and so that's what I call home. Probably the most time that I spent, and was fortunate enough to get recruited to play basketball, and started off at East Carolina, where I was able to, a couple of years there, and fortunate enough to go to a NCAA tournament there, and then transferred and finished up at the University of Evansville here in the Missouri Valley. and played for a wonderful coach, Jim Cruz, and who taught me a lot about the game and really paved the way for wanting to get into college coaching. And so right after I graduated college, I went right into coaching. Was a GA at University of Indianapolis for 2 years, and then as mentioned, this is my second stint. My first Division I job was here at Indiana State a long time ago, and so I've bounced around to a bunch of different schools, and now this is my second stint here at Indiana State, and really fortunate and glad to be back here to help out with Greg Lansing, who's been here for going on his 12th year here at Indiana State. Done a wonderful job here, and I have as mentioned, I have three kids, two biological, then a stepdaughter of mine who's 23. My boys are 15 and 10, and as we'll get into, having two boys through in this time, and it's an interesting time. I got a teenager who's getting ready to get his license here in a little bit of time, and so it's certainly a nervous time and exciting time all in one with everything that's going on, having two boys at this during this time. So that's kind of my story in short, and again, very, very honored to be a part.
We're glad to have you, Kareem. Thank you. Jamison, I wanted to start with you. Minneapolis is home for you. You actually grew up 3 blocks from where George Floyd was killed. Your community was directly affected in some of the aftermath from his death. How did seeing the pain of your own community become an impetus for you to take action as part of the Rebuild Minneapolis campaign?
For everyone, especially, being in Minneapolis, it's been sort of a emotional time, and, sort of just seeing, your city go from the wonderful place that we know it is, at least on the outside. And then the next day sort of just on fire is something that, is completely foreign to most in the United States. And you don't think you'd ever see that, in the reality that we live in today. But, it was, you would each get a note each day. So after George Floyd was murdered, the protest the next day, I believe on that Tuesday, peaceful. It was always peaceful in the morning. Everything, when there's tons of people, you would see this hope and this want for change. And then sort of at night, it would seem like emotions would boil over and more or less looked like a third world country. You saw these things that, buildings on fire, it was very lawless at the moment, but also it's a lot of pain. You see a lot of pain, and like a lot of my high school friends out there that, I saw, running around doing things that may or may not have been, sort of supported, but it was something that, a lot of people were hurt. A lot of people were feeling pain, and that's the way that some chose to express that anger and that frustration. And so for me, just looking at it, you got a sort of a gamut of emotions that were on display. And, I think the one thing that, my girlfriend and I, she was the one that helped with this campaign that we sort of ran was, that first night we saw just, the problem was, it wasn't just your Targets, your Walmarts that were on fire. It was sort of these small businesses. It was these minority owned businesses that were getting destroyed, getting looted. And we just, felt sort of a pull to do something. And that's sort of where, that came from. And honestly, it was a lot of support from, my networks in Iowa, in California, and people knowing that, I live in Minneapolis, and they were like, is there any way to help? And at that point, we were like, looked at ourselves, and she's actually a volleyball player at South Dakota. She's in the Summit League. So obviously the worst league out of the two, but so there was a little competition there. And so, we kind of, that sort of stemmed our sort of initiative to try to help these businesses sort of get back on their feet, right away.
You and your girlfriend, Kelly Law, you actually raised over $14,000 towards that initiative. When you went out in the community and you distributed the money and some of the donations to these local minority business owners, what were the reactions?
Yeah, and for us, we saw these sort of funds popping up, which are great, and that raised millions of dollars. But it was, as I'm sure many of us know, it's going to take a while for that money to get into the hands of these business owners. And the stories that we heard were just one purely amazing. Like the first place we went to, we heard from a friend that someone was in need. There was a jewelry store owner that had his shop sort of all tore up, took everything out of it. So we went there, and when we got there, he sort of told us that he was going to be fine. The insurance was going to pick up, but one of his other business owners right next to him, she was, new citizen to the United States, and same sort of building this jewelry shop right next to him, didn't have insurance. And so he was like, if you want to give her, the funds, that would be great. And so it's sort of that, in these moments of distress that, you still see this good of humanity, and he just passed it on. It's like, hey, can you give it to her and not me? I don't need it as much as she does. And so that was kind of the pretty much like along the whole lines of just, sort of good stories to hear. One of my favorite ones was went to a barbershop over on the north side of Minneapolis, and went there, and I kept seeing the last name, and I was like, I know this name. And I get there, we just exchange the money and have like a wonderful conversation. At the end of it, he's like, yeah, my son played football at Washburn, which was where I went to, high school. And I was like, is your son, Rory? And he's like, that's my son. I've known him. Like, so I kind of coached him before I left. And so it was a really good feeling to like know that, we were helping in this regard. And it's just been, wonderful to sort of see this change in Minneapolis, that even though we are sort of hurting at the moment, there's all these stories of positive, influence in our community.
That's awesome. It's so great that you and your girlfriend did that. Kareem, you've taken action in a different way. Why did you become involved with the Coaches for Change mission?
It was easy. A good friend of mine, Carmen, who kind of spearheaded, he's a head coach at Siena. We were on at that time on several different Zoom meetings and talks about everything that was going on. And in one of the Zoom meetings that I was on, it was a predominantly Black coaches on there, just voicing their frustration. And Carm happened to be on the call, and I think was really took a pretty good step forward of being probably one of the only. It was about 150 coaches on there, and there were probably like a handful of white coaches on there. And Carm spoke up and said something that I thought was really interesting. He was just kind of giving feedback. He's like, hey, maybe we should, when the season comes, maybe we should, kneel for 8 minutes and 46 seconds or, whatever we can do. And I shot Carm a text afterwards, and I said, hey, Carm, I thought that was a really good idea. And he's like, we were talking, then we spoke, and he was telling me about his idea for coaches. And he asked if I would help, if I thought it was a good idea. And I was like, excellent idea. And we kind of put our heads together and started reaching out to different coaches and wanted it to be a diverse group. And so being a part of that was a no-brainer for me. And, as I was telling Carm, I've always pretty much have taken the politically correct road, I guess to say, in this business, and there's many reasons for that, and ironically, one of the biggest reasons is being a Black coach in this business has always, I've always felt like I've had to watch what I say to make sure that I don't, intimidate or scare white counterparts and what's going on. And so I've been in this business now since '97, so I've been in this over 20 years, and it was just time for me to speak and not feel like I have to hold my tongue, so to speak, and be a part of something in this business more than just wins and losses, and so obviously trying to help guys graduate and so forth, so on. But do something that I think for the society would be a great thing. And so I'm so ecstatic to be a part of such a powerful group. We have over 100 members now in the group. It started off as our original group was about 40 men's coaches. And again, like I said, from coast to coast, we have every conference that's represented in our group. And now then, as we started talking and we started getting things out there for social media wise, some women coaches were asking how they can get involved. And so we thought that would be a wonderful idea to expand it, not just women, but women coaches. And then we got strength and conditioning coaches, because they see the players in a different light and probably spend more time than we do as coaches. So we have, like I said, we have 100 coaches. Everybody's a coach. Everybody's coaches that are involved with this organization. And we have an advisory group that's super powerful as well. And so it's just been awesome. And one of our biggest things right now, as we all know, November 3rd with the voting has been big, and we've challenged each program to get 100% voter registration amongst their players, and then see if we can expand that to other teams and across campus. And so I'm proud to say matter of fact, today we're going to get something out. We finally got all our guys. We're going to be at 100%. We are at 100% now, which is awesome. And we're just trying to get that message out. That's our first agenda right now. And then after we're going to keep it going. It's not an organization where we're going to be kind of like a one-hit wonder, so to speak, and talking about voting. But we want to talk about and see if we can get some of these laws, reformed and things that hit our own each individual, like in Terre Haute or Chicago, wherever it may be, each individual city and town, to get some laws in there that have don't quite make sense. That can be, whether it's from the way that, as we see times, how long it takes in some places, voter suppression, how long it takes to vote, and to try to discourage people from voting. It's taking 6-7 hours, where we know there should be a better way to get those type of things done. And so long story short, I'm an elder statesman in this profession, and I just thought it was a great opportunity for me to be a part of something really powerful as Coaches for Change.
Kareem, I'm glad you brought up the voting, because one thing I wanted to ask all three of you about is how important is it right now to empower the student athletes to use their voices and to help create change by voting?
It's super powerful. Our 4 pillars of the Coaches for Change, you talk about empower. We have the 4 C's that we talk about. We have engage, we have educate, we have empowerment, and we have evolve. And it's super important for our student athletes. And I'll be honest with you, not only our student athletes, but coaches and people of alike. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not afraid to admit it. I'm ashamed, but I'm not afraid. I've voted twice in my lifetime. And because I was one of those that thought it wasn't that important. And so, it's hopefully we can get the message across to our student athletes, and then whomever else, hopefully even younger than that kind of see our, because we even try to reach the high school level, high school coaches, and so they can get to their players. I know some of them may not be 18, but just so they can start hearing about how important, and not only just the national, the presidents, but the local. That's where we're talking about. That's where, we're hearing it more and more. That's where the change really comes from our local voting, and knowing, who's our state representatives, who's attorney general, all of those things, and that's where we really want to try to hit home even more so within our own communities, and not just the national president race.
And as you mentioned, Indiana State, your entire team's now registered to vote, and that's something we're seeing in a lot of teams in our league. And what's encouraging too is that a lot of our teams in our league have even said on November 3rd, you're not going to practice. Some of them aren't going to practice. They're going to allow their team to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to go vote.
No question about it.
Shannon.
That part's really interesting just because it reminds me of something I wrote that came out today about the history of athletes protesting and activism and just the influence athletes can have. So, I think when a campus sees athletes voting, or this idea of you're giving athletes the day off to vote, should that be a national holiday? And it gets people thinking, and it puts pressure on our legislators. And there's a really long history of this with the power that athletes have had, not just to change minds in this country. And, you admire somebody like Jesse Owens or Jackie Robinson or Althea Gibson, and you start seeing them as people and seeing the barriers they break. But there's also, I think, a power that we're seeing going on right now with the collective nature of the athlete protest that's gone across every league and every team, and gender, race being involved. That is a really unique time. So we're seeing like what the NBA did, where they're turning voting arenas into voting sites, and they're putting pressure on legislators to end qualified immunity for policing. And I think right now what we're seeing is a new tide of athlete activism that isn't going away soon. And I think it's really resonating with just every American right now, where sometimes you think, okay, that's a nice story, good for this guy, is doing something, but you're just seeing it in such numbers. And we're all going through it at the same time too, like what Jameson said about seeing the protests in Minneapolis, and every city is seeing that right now, or so somewhere in your state probably this is going on, and you're seeing it in a more first person way for some of us, that I think it's connecting with people more, and athletes are really at the forefront of that. So for my responsibility as a reporter, I think there's been a really long, not great record for sports media, which has largely been white men, to go along with this stick to sports idea and just do the numbers and the games and the stats, and not really delve into the lives of the athletes, what you're going through, what changes do you want. I think, I think often even at the college level, where college activism is like such a almost tenet of of the American experience. So I just feel like with my responsibility, and I think it is changing, but we need to cover these athletes as more than just basketball players or football players, but as human beings and actually like social changers. And I think we are seeing that, but obviously there's a lot of pushback. I mean, every time an athlete does something, you're targeted by the president of the United States. I mean, that is a huge risk. And it's really impressive to me that I think after what happened with Colin Kaepernick, who took a huge risk and was ostracized and villainized by so many people in America, and also really beloved by a lot of people too, right? But from like the presidential level and administrative level of our country, but then to see athletes not be scared off by that and to embrace that and really band together and come together in this moment, I think it's having a big impact in how our country has seen the Black Lives Matter movement. I think you have to give athletes a lot of credit for almost like normalizing that among white people in America. So I think it's a really just stunning time in our country. So I feel like honored to be able to cover this, but I also feel like it's my responsibility. So it is somewhat irritating, or you shake your head a little bit when you see people ignoring that part, because I think sports has been thought of as like this separate entity in newspapers or media that you're not supposed to cross those lines when those lines have always been crossed. And unfortunately, I mean, you look back even to when the color line was being broken in baseball, and that was really widely known and covered because of Black newspapers and Black-owned newspapers and Black reporters covering that. If you look back, I mean, a lot of white newspapers didn't really even talk about it much, which is like so bizarre and irresponsible. So hopefully we're starting, I think, to come a ways from that, just because it's being forced on a lot of people too. So it does take risk because, you know, people don't always want to hear that. You know, I get not so pleasant emails every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, but it's my responsibility as a reporter. So just kind of going off what Kareem was saying about the voting part and the activism right now, it's a really interesting time for my job, and especially, you know, with that intersection with COVID too, and sports and race all kind of combined there, that we have a lot to, this idea that there's nothing to cover because there aren't games being played, not in my world. So I don't think that should be in anybody's world right now when you're a reporter, no matter what you're covering.
Janet, you hit on a lot of points I want to delve in on more in a second, including the lack of diversity in our own industry in sports media. I want to give Jameson an opportunity, though, just anything he has to say about student athletes and voting.
Shannon and Kareem all, you know, hit on, you know, almost everything you could touch there. And I think one of the things that especially athletes have with their platform is sort of keeping this discussion and this narrative in the social consciousness of right now. And I think that's what athletes are able to do with this platform, especially on the, you know, college level and going up to the professional leagues. But this ability to keep what matters at the forefront of our discussion and our society is something that, like we all know, this is going to be, it's not an overnight thing. It's going to take time. And I think what athletes are able to do is keep that there and keep that in people's minds and use this platform. You know, most teams nowadays and most of these athletes have, you know, thousands and thousands of followers that people are seeing, and you're seeing this every single day. And if that sort of change and, you know, more or less the ability to keep it there is there for a long time, that's when I think sort of this change come about. And I think that's where, you know, athletes and their platform sort of, you know, take over and do what we all wanted to do.
Can I jump in there too?
Absolutely.
Kind of
Go
kind
right
of
ahead.
piggyback to what Jameson was saying and keeping it going. And it's pretty awesome to see. And, you know, the thing, and I'll be very candid, the thing that I hope doesn't happen and prohibit things is, because I know it's a little bit of a business as well when you start talking about college athletics, not a little bit, a lot of business in college athletics. And where I'm getting to is hopefully that we have enough athletic directors and presidents and chancellors out there that continue to support these athletes, student athletes, for what the position that they're taking, the activism that they're doing, and not allow money to get in the way. And what I mean by that is there still has to be fundraising done, right? And so I hope you know, the presidents and the chancellors and the ADs don't allow fundraising, because you may make some let's be honest, you may make some boosters and donors a little uncomfortable with all this. And so there's still going to be that part of it too, where they're like, you know, if you piss somebody off, they may not give you that check that you're looking for. But I think it's going to be important for our student athletes to know, not just on the surface, but deep down, that they have the support from the administrators.
That's a really great point. I'm curious from all three of you, when it comes to the media, as Shannon alluded to, the reality is that the majority of reporters covering sports in our industry are white, and mostly white male. And that's something I have conversations with all the time with my colleagues and friends, especially of color in our industry, is how do we fix that and how do we change that? So when you have reporters like myself, like Shannon, who are white, we happen to be female, how do we best embrace the responsibility that comes with understanding and reporting on these social issues? Shannon, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Kareem and go to Jameson.
Oh gosh, I'd love to hear from Kareem and Jameson on this, because I mean, I think about it a lot too. And you know, like I said, we all have a responsibility to write about it, but you also have to be educated on it. So a lot of people might write about race in sports and just handle it really poorly. But I think a lot of it is listening, and a lot of it is, it's a lot easier right now. I mean, everybody has a social media platform, and people are already being outspoken before you approach somebody to say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I think another thing, what Kareem mentioned, that stood out to me about getting white coaches involved is, you know, these questions shouldn't just be asked to Black athletes and Black coaches. Like, we have a responsibility to ask athletic directors, what are you doing about this? Or, you know, universities, what are your hiring practices too? And then sports media in general too. I mean, it's largely a white field. And even I've had places where, like, I'm the only woman, but like I'm also white, and people will be like, oh, we're diverse. We have Shannon. I'm like, no, that's not covering all the bases here, you know? So there's a problem with that as well. So yeah, I mean, we can be the biggest hypocrites in a way in sports media, because we're not doing it, and we're not, but you know, when we get, you know, the Black women in this field and women of color in this field are extremely marginalized. And I see this excuse all the time when new startup websites start. It's always like, oh, it's just hard to find people. It's really not. I mean, we have the NABJ. You see places like the Undefeated and the talent there. There's so much young talent too, and you see, just like in coaching. I mean, you know, who rises to the top sometime or gets these chances, you know, without some long track record, or, you know, so, I mean, there is talent there. We have to do better in our industry too. I don't know if that answered your question. I'd love to hear more from Kareem and Jameson though about how to approach that.
Kareem.
I think with the, you know, listening, you know, we're hearing that a lot. You know, we got to listen, and more important thing, we got to hear stories and hear what student athletes are going to, and hopefully, you know, like Shannon, you know, she reports with Loyola, being able to get in there when, you know, I know media can't be on our campus right now, but when you can be on campus and actually hear individual stories and what's going on, you know, because there's you know, on the surface, we all think or, you know, a lot of times people that aren't within the circle think these student athletes are invincible, like they aren't bothered by a lot of things. And so, which is just the opposite. It's a scary time for them, and have their own stories about seeing a relative or maybe themselves being involved with being pulled over by a police officer and being treated the wrong way, and kind of being stereotyped and different things like that. So hearing and again, I more so not only listen, but I think hear stories and hear the feelings of these student athletes, to be able to break that barrier down for you know, white females to be able to get in there and be able to understand and be able to know what these guys are feeling like, and their emotions, and what triggers their emotions, what you know, how they really truly feel about things.
I think what, you know, is, especially within sports media and, you know, society in general, is this sort of conception that athletes are invincible and that they, you know, don't have feelings, don't have emotions. And I think, especially right, and even within the athletic community themselves, I think we have this sort of, nothing can touch us, this invincibility about it. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, it's sort of this prevailing thought and this sort of undercurrent of seeing people that look like you get killed every day. These measures in place to sort of keep you down. These things take their toll. And I think and it's hard to come to grips with as athletes, but I think it's now more than ever, it's starting to sort of come about in ways that are healthy. And I think sort of understanding this trauma and emotion behind all of those, especially Black men in athletics, is paramount to sort of understanding what athletes go through on sort of a daily basis. And I think I'm sure Coach can attest to that. But these young men, these young women in these fields, there seems to get more and more on their plate as sort of days and days go on, and sort of this prevailing nature that you have to also be an activist on top of school, on top of practice, on top of family life is just another thing added to the plate.
For the faction of people out there that say athletes and coaches need to stick to sports, that they need to shut up and dribble, that politics, race, social issues, that they don't belong in sports, what would you all want them to understand about the athletes and coaches they look to for entertainment, yet at the same time are criticizing for speaking out on anything unrelated to sports? Jameson, let's start with you.
Honestly, I think there might be a point to just playing basketball, right? And sort of playing sports. It's sort of that, and it might sound odd, but doing this, that's your platform. So if you're doing this, I'm like, do that to the best of your ability, and what comes with it, then you're going to be able to bring these issues up. And so by just playing basketball, you're able to then, build this platform. So I think it sort of goes against those that say, oh, you can only play basketball, oh, you can only play football. It's sort of, do that, great. And then the opportunity that is afforded to you is then you can put these things on your platform. You can do these things. So I think I think it was, when LeBron James recently reached out to President Obama said, sort of go play basketball, go do what you do. Don't let these things take away from, what makes you happy. Go play basketball, and doing that will bring even more than sort of sitting out. And obviously there's a point to the sitting out and bringing awareness, but how many people watch, Indiana State games, how many people watch, Northern Iowa games. There's going to be thousands of people every night watching these games, and doing that to the best of your ability, and then being able to, at the end of the day, sort of bring awareness to issues that, matter is, I think it's sort of invaluable at this point.
Shannon.
Yeah, this is something I think about a lot. Just like I said, the emails I get are all stick to sports, basically, for me too, but mostly aimed at, don't pay any mind to what these athletes and coaches are saying. We just want them for our entertainment purposes, which, if you want to think of it like in a bigger realm, goes really back to like Jim Crow era stuff, which is pretty disturbing that, you're fine to entertain us, but nothing else. And I think that's a lot more pervasive than what people want to realize, maybe even on university campuses, when we're thinking about how much money athletes generate for colleges. And then, however you want to think about it, there's a lot of different ways, but compensated in some way, or, protected health-wise long-term in certain ways. But when I hear from people saying just stick to sports, I don't even really think a lot of people actually believe that. It's stick to my politics, because, right now, when the president was telling Colin Kaepernick and other athletes not to kneel and get out of this country, but then, if you look at why the national anthem is played at sports, it was a military PR thing. That's sports and politics. The president weighing in on whether Big Ten football should play, and some people are like, yes, we love that. That's sports and politics. And then, like I said before, there's a lot of historical things that have changed because of sports and politics. I mean, you look at segregation, a lot of it, was with cities, buses, lunch counters, but there was also stadiums that were being integrated because of athletes demanding it. The 1965 AFL game in New Orleans basically helped desegregate that city. So yeah, I think it's a pretty naive thing for people to say. It's hard when a lot of people do right now too. I understand that, you want an escape because things are not great right now. We're living in a pandemic where there's civil unrest. People are out of jobs, and it is nice to just sit and watch a game, but we can't be completely immune and separated. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive either. So I think people who use that line, it is a lot of political posturing, in my opinion, because it's just when it's convenient to them that people should shut up.
The reality is too that I think people think racism doesn't exist on both sides politically. There's racists who are Democrats and there are racists who are Republicans. It's not mutually exclusive to one party or the other either. So.
Yeah, I also think, that some of these issues aren't political. Like, it's not political to say people should have equal rights. It has been made that way, but that shouldn't be a political statement. Even when you look at COVID, like saying, we should keep people as safe as possible. That shouldn't be political. A lot of these things in our country that have become political. And especially I think when it comes to topics of race, when people are just asking for equality and human rights, turning that into like a political stunt for votes is very disappointing, but that's gone on for quite a while.
I agree with Shannon and Jameson, and it's interesting. I love how Shannon put it, like, people at their convenience, and so that's I think that's spot on. You can't, you want it every which way, but whichever way is more convenient for you or aligns with your individual beliefs is definitely the way. But my thing is, and I'm probably a little outside the box, and kind of, it really bothers me when you do hear that, just shut up and dribble, or athletes shouldn't be talking about things that are going on in the world, like we're talking about social injustice or whatever it may be. And my thing is, like, whose platform should it be? Like, who, if you're a school teacher, like, does that give you, or if you're a firefighter, does that give you, like, whose platform does it necessarily go to? Who is it okay with? And so I think, people get have been, now the way the numbers are, and the camaraderie and the unity that sports have come to with all of this, I think it has made some people very uncomfortable, and it doesn't align with what their beliefs are. And so it's really bothersome to know that people feel and say that, coaches and athletes shouldn't speak upon things. We're humans, for goodness sakes, and so when we turn on the TV and see, Breonna Taylor being shot and killed, or George Floyd being stepped on his neck and choked out, and, it's like, so why shouldn't we have the right to a platform, in our opinion, just like anyone else? And so I just go back. I just love with what, especially younger generation, men and women, have come together and really bonded throughout all of this.
For the three of you, again, what does it look like to be a real ally and advocate against racism? And Kareem, let's start with you, because your mic's probably still open.
No, it's I mentioned a little bit about my kids, and and that's where I think it's hopefully it's going to hit home. Yeah, I think we've certainly started down the right road of change. We started. Now it's a heck of a long ways to go. But I think about my kids, and again, my two boys at 15 and 10, getting ready to be 16 and 11. One getting ready to have a driver's license, and being, having to have these discussions with my kids. Like Shannon, my boys are biracial, but at the end of the day, they're Black. And that's how they're going to be perceived in the world. And if a cop pulls them over, they're going to be a young Black teenager driving a car that they're not quite sure about, and so I think it's pretty cool, so to speak, to be able to have these conversations, and now we can be as open as we are, whether it's my own kids, whether it's our players. And so, we had a conversation, we had a Zoom meeting with our guys after the Jacob Blake situation. And our guys were a little quiet as we were talking about things, and you can kind of feel the anger and discouragement that's happened, because you feel like we were making change. Oh, now here we go again. But the thing that I told them as we were talking, I said, I just hope that they're being quiet doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have an opinion about things. And so I just hope that the younger people, they may not always have something to say, but I hope they're formulating an opinion or for themselves. Not, you listen and you hear what people are saying, but I hope they're formulating a great and honest opinion about everything that's going on. So when their time, they do feel comfortable enough to speak, that they have gathered up enough information, educated themselves well enough to be able to talk about this different types of racism that are going on.
Jameson.
I might touch on a point that you sort of brought up earlier. It's not either a Republican or a Democrat issue. And I think one of those things, especially in northern cities, and if I may just use sort of Minneapolis, for example, but this white liberalism complex of, well, I'm not racist, I can't be racist, I have Black friends, I have, people of color, I don't do anything explicitly racist, but understanding that, racism isn't purely an outward sort of look. This is an institutionalized problem, and a problem that, undergirds many of the systems and things within society that sort of control, whether that's education, benefits, it runs the entire line of things. But this sort of, I think it really comes down to understanding that we are sort of fallible, and that, we might not have all of the answers, and you might have some racist views, and I think what we see in Minneapolis, at least I've seen quite a bit, and Minneapolis is sort of portrayed as this extremely liberal city, in which it is, but that doesn't make it immune from sort of racist indications or racist moves. And I think what we've seen lately, just with our sort of civil unrest here, is, I'm all for the protesting, I'm all for the peaceful protests, but I can't believe people are rioting. I can't believe people are breaking things down. And at the end of the day, that's like, if that's what, sort of is the move of the people of color, the Black individuals in this area, I think you might not be able to agree with it, but you kind of have to understand that if this is the way that people are able to express their emotion, like, I think Kareem was saying, and Shannon both, it wasn't okay for Colin Kaepernick to kneel, right? It wasn't okay to you can't put BLM, you can't put a black square on your Instagram. So then it comes out like, what are we able to do? And so I think that's where, you kind of have these more or less microaggressions within the conversations that we have, both, conservative and, liberal individuals.
Jameson, I want to ask you a follow-up really quick. You mentioned the rioting and the looting, and one of the things that I get most often sort of as a rebuttal when I'm talking to people about this stuff is this tendency to focus on the rioting and the looting, which I think we can all agree none of us condone necessarily. But the reality is, for example, I just saw a study the other day that was done. 93% of Black Lives Matter marches have been peaceful, and that's the reality. But there's a lot of people out there that just can't get away from focusing on the rioting. And so what do you say to those people?
Yeah, and I think it's honestly just accepting that that's the course of American history throughout. That's how change has been done. If we were to tell, the Boston Tea Party, why did you throw the tea in the ocean? Like, why did you do that? You could have just, done that peacefully. I don't think that's necessarily how change comes about. And if you look at it now, sort of, people have been protesting peacefully for, let's just say since the civil rights movement. And we've had, change along the way, incremental change. But, overnight, I think conversations were discussed about defunding police because of these issues. And I think as much as we may not like rioting and not condone it, I think the effectiveness of what happened, and sort of just in the American context, an American historical context, is this is what Americans have done. And I think it's only a problem when minorities do it, right? And you see it, especially in sports. And like, if we're talking about sports, you see it every time: the Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup, the whatever it is, there's always some sort of riot, some sort of destruction, but it's only a problem when, minority individuals are involved. So I'm sort of like, if we're going to, call the kettle black, it's sort of the same thing. Like, we have to accept it on both sides of the issue.
That's a good point. Shannon.
Yeah, I think what Jameson said really resonates. I mean, living in Chicago, even when I moved here from Philadelphia, which isn't known as some like racial, haven, but Chicago, it just really struck me, the segregation in this city, and the just how the history of that is so ingrained in Chicago. And I think if you're not from here originally, like, you just accept that as normal. So even people who are, consider themselves very progressive, very liberal, white people I know and consider friends, it comes down to, like you said, those systems that are in place, and then your individual choices within those systems. Like, what neighborhood are you choosing to live and raise your family in Chicago? You're choosing in a city that is not majority white to raise your kid in like an all white neighborhood. I mean, and when I hear somebody in Chicago say like, oh, we don't have a lot of diversity. I mean, that is a choice on your part. Like, you're self-segregating, really, in my opinion, on that. So we do have choices within these systems. And yeah, I think with the rioting part too, one thing that I don't know, there's a million examples, but it really hit me with somebody I know who went to college with and saw, who had not said really anything about Jacob Blake or George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, but was very, very, very disgusted and moved and emotional about these Michigan Avenue high-end Cartier stores having their windows broken. Those aren't human lives. I mean, yeah, that shouldn't happen. And when it happens in under-resourced neighborhoods and majority Black neighborhoods, I can see even more the devastation and real life effect of that. But I feel like in a lot of places, people are a lot more moved and sad and heartbroken and have a lot more to say about some windows being broken than they do about people losing their lives. And as far as leadership and trying to link that into my job, I think like a big thing that I've tried to learn, and I'm not perfect at all, I still have a lot more to learn on this and try to do better, but it is what Kareem had said about listening and actually hearing what people are talking about that I cover, letting them tell me what the story is. And also just even, when I'm quoting people or looking for an expert, to look for Black voices, or depending on the topic, people of color, let them be the voices of experts on this, and use that and talk to as many people as I can to learn about the varied experiences, and giving people an opportunity, like I said, to tell me the story rather than me trying to dictate what that is.
Kareem, you touched a little bit earlier on your own kids, and as we kind of wind this down, I want to get thoughts from yourself and from Shannon, who you all are raising biracial children. And so how have you gone about navigating these last 4 to 5 months? Because I'm sure all of your kids have questions.
My sophomore, he's kind of, he's naive, to the fact of the racism, to be honest with you, until here of late. And what I mean by that is he had an experience at the last school that he was at, and I won't say the town or city or whatever, but finally got an understanding of what that looks like. And so then when we went into COVID, and then everything with that's gone on with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and things, and so it's been an opportunity for me to be able to educate him a little bit more, even with his experience that happened. Let's face it, being in college athletics, they're around pretty diverse, and where we live and where he's gone to school typically, and being around, so it's been pretty, eye-opening for him to understand that this still goes on. My 10-year-old who's in the 5th grade, still doesn't quite understand it, but trying to, just still the same way, just trying to teach him about what to keep his eyes and ears open for when he's in school or when he's around people, to be able to, if he's not comfortable with things that are being said that he doesn't feel that are racially inclined to what should be going on, to be able to speak up for himself. I don't want my kids to run from the situation. I want my kids to be able to speak up a heck of a lot earlier than I did, and so that doesn't mean to cause conflict, but if you hear something or somebody speaking about somebody else that's of another race, and you don't think that's right, then I think we should speak up. And those are type of things that I'm trying to teach my kids on. And obviously with I touched upon again with my 15-year-old getting ready to be 16 and get his license. It's crazy. They got to talk to him about when he gets pulled over, how to be able to handle themselves, having your, before the cop gets there, having your registration, having everything out, in the driver's seat or on the dashboard, trying to, keep your hands on the wheel. It's sad that I have to talk to him and give him that, but that's the reality of it. Of again, a soon-to-be 16-year-old kid who's going to eventually get pulled over by cops in areas that, and let's be honest, I'm in Terre Haute, Indiana, that are some areas that aren't as diverse as we're accustomed to, and so those are the type of conversations that we've had to have.
Kareem, you mentioned earlier in this conversation about in the past you've been sort of PC, politically correct. Now that you're using your voice more, how liberating has it been to be able to feel like you can finally use your voice?
Yeah, it's been awesome. I mean, it's been, I do. I feel relieved, that we can, and not only obviously myself, but we can all kind of speak more freely. I mean, the student athletes, again, I go back to see hearing how powerful some of these student athletes have been, and speaking their minds and doing, coming together and doing things has been awesome. And so, that's where I kind of go back to my own kids again. I hope that they can be braver than I was. I'll be honest with you, and less fearful of what could happen. You think about Colin Kaepernick and what he did. Was it 4 years ago? He kneeled, and a lot of people he gets blackballed from football. And now we got NBA, we got MLS, we got WNBA, we got all these teams that are taking a knee, and it's celebrated, and so to speak, for a lot of us. Now I know there's some that don't like that or don't celebrate it, but to be able to understand the change that we can make when we're all able to express ourselves in the right manner is powerful.
Shannon, your son is a little bit younger, so what's been your experiences navigating this time with him?
Yeah, well, one thing I wanted to jump off what Kareem said is just about having his kids feel brave enough to speak up. I hope what's different about this time, hopefully, is that there'll be other kids there with him and not just other Black kids. And I think that's maybe one of the more powerful things about what we're seeing right now. It hasn't all played out perfectly, but that you are seeing more white people marching for Black Lives Matter and other causes. I'm thinking of like Illinois State is leading an athlete boycott right now against, not practicing right now until they see some changes on their campus. I think that school is like, I want to say like 8% Black, but this boycott's gone across almost every team. And I talked to one of the athletes on the track team or cross country team, and he's the only Black athlete on that team, but he has the support of all of his white teammates who are also boycotting. And I think that hopefully is what could make a difference. As far as with my own son is he just turned 8 in July, and so he is younger, but something that stood out, I've never like shied away from talking to him about this, and luckily I have a lot of good friends in the school system that's supportive and has helped me learn how to navigate this. But I don't really like teaching him about Black history. It's only about slavery and only about police brutality, and to be proud of who he is and resisting within those systems and those time periods, and feeling strength from that, and thinking about life before slavery and the things enduring all these amazing things that Black people have done throughout history. But something that I just thought was like, wow, kids see things so in such a better way sometimes than adults is I talked to him. I don't get like very graphic, but he does know that these things have happened as far as like the police killings and George Floyd and Jacob Blake. Jacob Blake was from Evanston, where we live. And I showed him a video of all these people marching in Evanston. And, I think a lot of parents, white parents, would think, gosh, that's going to scare your kid, and your kid's going to just now be so fearful, and you're taking away their innocence. And I didn't say anything really. And my son's takeaway was, wow, all these people care about my future, and all these people are willing to risk their lives for me. That was his takeaway, that he saw power in that. And I hope like we can all start to see it that way. I think that would really benefit everybody if we start to see just that this is something for all of us.
As we wind this down, I just want to get closing thoughts from each of you. So Jameson, let's start with you.
Thank you again, Kelly, for this opportunity. And I think, this is obviously a very pivotal time in sort of, our history. And I think this notion that, I think we all should accept that we are living through history now, and it's those things that you hear about in textbooks, that's what's happening right now, right? And I think sort of for everyone to sort of have that impetus of this is what is happening, and this is how we are crafting, our future is something that, I think we can all look forward to. And I think, you see it within, comments on the Missouri Valley Instagram page, right? Not everyone agrees with what's going on, and that's okay. But I think we understand that if you want to be on the right side of history, I think we all know where that's going. And I think this sort of ability, like I think Kareem and Shannon was saying, but we do have to get out there and vote. It changes how we make change is these systematic issues that need to be addressed. And like Kareem was saying, it's not just the president. It's going to come down to, state, municipality elections that really does change for, individual lives and communities of color throughout, the United States. So I think, that a lot of that pressure is then put on, our athletes and people of color to, step up and do, what we've been doing for the last 400 or 500 years. So I think, I'm excited to see what happens, and I'm grateful that, we have a conference that is, again, sort of championing the efforts that we all want to push forward.
Kelly, like Jeremy said, thank you for having me, and also it's been really. I think of myself as a Missouri Valley guy. I played in the Valley. I've coached it. Seems like almost every school in the league, and so I'm a Valley person through in and throughout, and so this makes me feel very proud that you guys are doing this and having these type of conversations and dialogues, and as we, again, another uncomfortable, like these type of topics have been uncomfortable for a lot of us, and so to be able to continue having these uncomfortable conversations, we have to do. And we can't, again, as I mentioned with our C4C, our Coaches for Change, our emphasis right now is voting. But we, when I say we, I mean we as a society and coaches and athletes, it can't stop after November 3rd. We got to keep this thing rolling. We got to keep the momentum going. And for somebody like me that has kids at 15 and 10 and 23, like we've got to keep this thing going so they can see significant change as they become old like me. And so I just again appreciate the Valley for doing this, and hopefully we can keep this thing going.
Shannon.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to be part of this discussion and to learn a lot today from Kareem and Jameson too, and a lot of things to consider here with how I do my job and live my life as an individual too. I think one thing, I think what Jameson said about just we're living through history. What side of history do you want to be on? I think sports is a great way to look at that. I hope people can start to, delve in. I don't know that we're the best at American history, but learning from history. But, if we want to take that, everybody I know, I feel like every old guy in America has some kind of like Muhammad Ali poster or something. America hated this guy. Everyone's grandpa who said they loved Muhammad Ali, they're lying. They're all lying. He was just, obviously ostracized and, just considered just the most radical. That's why I used to laugh when people would talk about Kaepernick and I'm like, you say you like Muhammad Ali and you got a problem with this guy? Oh my gosh, like you wouldn't have been able to handle Muhammad Ali. And he's just one example. But, that we look at those examples of who now is seen as heroes. Even, when you look at the 1968 Olympics and Tommie Smith and John Carlos, and now that's like, one of the most iconic images in American history, not just sports history. But it shows like how integral and intertwined sports is with our society. And I feel like if we can start thinking about those things and about how sports really mirrors society and vice versa, there's a lot we could learn from being sports fans and being involved in this game. And hopefully it can help. It has helped before open minds and see things differently and enact political change and social change. So I think we're in that moment again, and I hope it is fulfilled.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Kareem. Thank you, Jameson. I am always so appreciative to be part of these discussions because I feel like every time we have one of these roundtables, I learn so much from people like you. So thank you for everything you're doing and the examples and the role models that you are in your respective communities.